Hello, this is part 2 of how to make a sheath for anything. So today we're going to be working on a sheath for a small bird and trout knife I made quite a while ago. Um, since we're doing sheaths for anything, basically we're also learning how to pattern. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is working a little more extensively on the pattern. A sheath for a knife is pretty simple. Here's a commercial sheath. This is a sheath that's just a sleeve, basically, or I like to call them a taco because you're folding it over. But as we've talked about before, there's three basic parts to a sheath. There's the front, there's the back, and there's a welt. And the welt is to protect the stitching or fastening or the materials itself from the blade edge. So what we want to do is give some sort of protection from the attachments with a welt. I can show you a sheath that I made a while back, and this was for a Kadash knife, like a Japanese cutting knife. And this one, the welt is on this side, but the blade edge is on this side. So this is not really effective. When you go to put this in and out of the sheath, you run the risk of cutting in to this side, so it doesn't really protect like stitching or the self. So the spine eventually is going to deteriorate, and this is going to be a bad design. Another one that I had done for this was front and back two-piece. So this is a smaller version of that, and this one has a welt that goes all the way around, kind of like we did on the very first sheath that we did. So this is a pouch or a pocket sheath, and it has a retaining strap to hold in this blade, which is, a little odd shaped. So that is another way to do it. And we do have a welt that protects the stitching and gives us the volume we need for the blade to go in and out without destroying the material. This is going to be a fold over sheath, so we're going to have a front and a back, and the cavity for the knife, and this is a fold in the middle, and then we have a welt on the side, which is the side with the blade. So when we go to actually make a pattern for a sheath, you first draw the blade. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm going to use a Sharpie, but I would use a pencil so you can erase your lines. I'm going to use a Sharpie so it's easier for us all to see. So we're just going to start with, this piece of cardstock here. You can use paper, whatever you've got, cardboard, cereal box. Cardboard is excellent to use. So we'll go ahead and we'll just do a basic outline. We don't need the whole handle. We just need an outline of where the blade is. So that shows us the blade, so kind of like this drawing here. And we've got the back of the blade coming up, or the handle. So this tells us where, gives us a representation, a scale representation of the knife itself. So the one thing we're going to have that is a constant is we need to have that welt, and that welt is basically this edge here, or the piece of leather that makes up the connection side. So we're going to go ahead and take this, and we're going to add at least to this curve out here, roughly at least a 1/4 inch is what I like to work with, but we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more so we have some that we can cut away. So all we're doing is copying this curvature of the blade, and now we have that. Now it also, we want to think about how do we want to have this fastened. So we're going to use stitch on this one, and then how do we want the front edge of this blade, or the pouch that this blade is going to go in, to look. So if we put this in here like this is how we want this to sit, and I want this to come somewhat up the handle and cover over to the side and have the back with a little more protection. Now this one also has a belt loop on it. So this here is just a tab that we're going to be sewing back this way, and this needs to be long enough that it's going to allow for a belt to go through it. So you know, just depending on what size belt you use is going to determine how long this strap needs to be. This one is accommodates up to about 1.5 inch belt, and so this strap on this one to accommodate that is about 4 inches. So out of that 4 inches, we're going to have about the last inch here is where we're going to use to attach that to the back of the envelope. Now, the further you pull it down, the greater size belt you can put in here you want, and depending on if you want it to hang or not, like hang down, like how loose you want it from the belt. So if we were to stitch this here, that length, we have plenty of room for roughly up to a 2-inch belt to go through that loop. So we also need to give some distance for the back, so we need to know what kind of leather we're going to be working with. So we're going to be using the same veg-tan that I was using for the last sheath, and this is some pretty heavy-duty thick stuff. So if we measure the thickness of this and we look at it here, we're at about 1/8 of an inch, or roughly 4 millimeters. So, and this is very firm, just like before. We want to use a firm leather. We can always soften the leather. It's tougher to make leather firm than it is to make it soft. So if we bend this leather, we can see that it will bend, but it's got a lot of resilience to it. It's going to want to pop back out. So we need to make accommodations for this for when we do a bend. So this one we're probably going to need to add to make a complete turnaround on this. We're going to need about almost 1 inch to make that return back. If we're using a thinner or softer leather like this, when we go to fold this over, you can see that this leather can make a tight bend back very easily. So this you wouldn't need to have extra in the spine if you're using a thinner leather like this, but this is much less protective both of the knife and yourself. So that's why we're using this heavier veg-tan. So what we'll need to do here is, since we need roughly 1 inch for that, if we look at this one overlaid, you can see where we had that accommodation here. So we're going to take that and move the blade over here like this, and we need, this is roughly 1/2 inch between here and here, and we got, looks like 3/4 of an inch for this, but I'm going to go a little further. So from where this is going to be the back, we want to move over, and we'll make it a little bit loose now. We can always trim it back if it's too loose. So we're going to go with 1 inch. So 1/2 inch is 1/2 inch, and that's going to be this mark here. So this plus the other 1/2 inch will give us what we need. So what we want to do now is put this fold into the paper or into the blade. And since this knife, I go, and you can, depending on how you want this to hang, I like to keep it pretty where the knife itself is vertical. So I'm like, if this, I'm coming straight down rather than this having the curvature on the back. So let's make this a line, and this will be the middle fold that we're going to be working with. So we'll go ahead and fold on this line. And all right, and this is going to make a left and a right sheath. So this, with this face up, and this being the grain side that we want, or the side that we determine, because you can do it grain or rough out, you know, the flesh side out, depending on the type of leather you're using or how you want to finish it. but this will be the face. So this will be the part that is visible from the outside. So this would be for a right-handed sheath that would hang on the right belt side. And if you want to make a left-handed one, you just go in the other direction, and then this would make a left-handed sheath. So this one would make the same sheath, just one pattern for both left and right. So we'll continue along with this. So we know that we have the blade like this, and then we want the sheath to have some sort of finish that comes up this way, because this is going to be the back of the fold. And we can have this sheath have sort of a curvature to how this, covers this portion of the blade. So from here, we're going to go ahead and make a little bit of an arc and come over this way, and then maybe come a little ways up the handle, and then again in this direction. Now, when we go to make the strap, because we want to cover halfway, so we're going to go here, because our strap is actually offset because it's going to be on the back side here. So that center line, it's actually going to be back here. So what we can do is go half that distance over, and that's what we're going to mark where the strap is going to start. It's going to be on the back half of the sheath, the taco sheath. So to finish that, we have to come back to the strap. So we're going to want to have a curvature over here where we can make these sort of smoothly come together. So you can make this shape any shape you want. What I'm trying to do is get the knife inside the sheath where the blade is completely covered, and give us a little bit of area for indentations so that we can kind of encompass the top and also have enough room at the top to be able to remove the knife from the sheath, so that when you reach down for it, you can pull it out of the sheath. You don't want to make it where just the tip is coming out, and you don't want to get it too far down here where it could fall out of the sheath. So roughly coming up in this direction, we're about matching. Well, we could come a little bit higher on this other sheath, so I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and match. Oh, let's see. That's about the same there because we haven't finished the bottom section. So this is going to come this way. And one way you can do this too is, if you don't want this to have just a straight spine on the back, is to have that follow. So now this looks more like this one, where when you fold it over, you stitch here, and then we have sort of this. Now also, if you're going to be using this outdoors a lot and you think that you're going to be getting it wet, it's always a good idea to have a hole at the bottom where if water does come in, it's going to be able to drain out of the sheath. If you're not too worried about that, you just don't want, it's going to be pretty watertight, like this one. Even this commercial sheath has a hole in the end right here where the welt stops. So you could stop the welt early, and then you would have this. It's basically a drain hole, allows air to circulate through the sheath. So using this as a, starting our pattern, it's roughly about the same size. And we're going to come over to our mark here. And what we're going to do for right now is we're just going to make that go all the way up for our strap. And when we go to cut this, we can cut it a little long since we haven't, folded the sheath together. So we have a welt is going to be this portion here. So we're drawing a line with a little bit of a space here to come down to the bottom. And we can go ahead and continue this all the way over if you want. Just like that. Now remember, this knife is going to be pretty close to the back, and the knife has dimension. The back of the spine is very narrow where the blade is, but when we're up here And the handle, that's where it's going to be a lot thicker. So we need that up at the top. Okay, so we have this side and that side. So what we can do at this point, since we have our basic shape, is we're going to cut this out. But we're not going to cut off here because we have the handle in the back. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and follow these contours. Okay, so we have this portion cut out. And then we can fold this over in the opposite direction. Take this off. And what we're going to do is we have that handle back here, or the strap for the belt. So what we want to do is not cut off the strap for the belt. So let's go ahead and basically line these up parallel to this fold. And we're going to draw a line, and we'll trim this back later when we decide how wide we want the strap to be. But for right now, we'll cut this out. So we're using this pattern back here so that we can get the same matching curvature. So we're just going to keep this so that we have the strap to the top. Now if you do make a mistake and you cut the strap off, or you don't like the strap, you can always retape when you do determine, you know, what you want to do with the strapping material. So I'm just following, I know it's difficult to see with this camera angle, but I'm following the same mark that we cut on the front side. So I'm just going ahead and paring this off. So basically designing one half of a sheath is how the other half, because you're going to fold this over, and this is where our stitches are going to be. Now I did taper it back in just a slight bit here, but that's because we haven't actually cut our strap. So we kind of determined that we wanted to have our strap about this far on this side, so we can go ahead and cut this line down to here and continue this curvature. So at this point, we've got half of a sheath designed. We know we have this large distance in the back here because we know that leather is going to be difficult to fold over, and we can always, you know, case it and form it to reduce it, and we can test it by putting the knife in here. And when we go to fold this over, the knife is going to sit further back into the pocket, and we still have this area here that is the welt. Now, we can make the welt come over a little bit further if this seems excessive, but remember we have thickness on the leather, so we're going to keep going in the way that we're going now. So on this one, we tapered this side here for the strap a little bit below, about midway where we started this upward arcs. So we can do the same thing here. So that we can go ahead and have this kind of come back around here. So if we look at this one and lay it over the top, this one has a little bit of a different angle. So that's roughly it. So we have this side over here, and we want to bring this up, and we want to determine how wide we want this strap to be. So if it's a bigger knife and heavier knife, you're going to want wider like this. A small knife like this, you don't need a massive strap for the belt loop. So this one is roughly 1.25 inches. So we can match that over here by measuring over 1.25 inches. And you can go as small as 1 inch. It's really your preference. So we'll extend this line down. Now, if we fold this over, going the opposite direction, we could just take this and match this line here if we want. So I would make a nice gentle curvature going over to that, because I don't like corners in my leather work. I always like nice rounded edges. So we can call this strap. So basically, aside from how we want to terminate the end here for this to be stitched on the back, whatever shape that is, that's about all we've done. But otherwise, we have created a pattern for a sheath. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut out the welt, and we're going to cut out this leather, and we're going to go ahead and fold it over and see how this all matches up before we do anything, because we can always move the knife back and move the welt back and then trim the leather. But we're going to start a little broad, and that's how we're going to fit this. Once we do that, we trim the leather back, we can take that piece of leather, say this is one that was fitted and works well, we can then put it back over our pattern, the paper pattern. If we have more than one of these knives that are the same, we can put that back over this, and then we can trim off the edges, and then we'll have a pattern if we have more than one knife that's the exact same shape. But that's how you pattern a knife. So we've gotten to this stage, so now we just need a piece of leather. So when you're choosing, your leather, we want that thicker leather like we were talking about. And when you want to try to avoid patches like this. This doesn't look all that bad from the grain side, other than this is, torn through. But if you look on the back, this is very loose. It's got a cut here, and so this is not a good spot to cut your pattern from. So the other side of this, we can see that this is very consistent. So we're going to cut our piece from in this area here. So if I'm right-handed, so I'm going to make this a right-handed sheath. So right-handed is going to be done this way. So when this goes onto my belt, the knife is like this. So when I remove it, I've got the knife in the correct position. So this is going to be the face or the side that I want out. So if I wanted to make this, because this is not bad, I could definitely finish this and make this, flesh out, and we could wax that really well. So I would lay the pattern down this way, but whatever side is up, so this we're going to put an R on for right hand. So if you're doing a right-handed, it's going to be this side out. So just take your paper, fold it, your pattern, check that is going to be if you want right-handed, and then also if you decide you want it's going to make a left-handed, you want to do the same kind of check, this, so that the knife is in this position. Go on this side and pull out. Or if you decided that you wanted to make this like a horizontal belt carry, then you would have your belt strap coming across this way. So that would be, you know, just another way to design the strap across here, or put a belt clip and fasten it here. And then you'd have a belt clip that rotates so you could carry it in either position. But for this, we're just going to work with the leather. So I think I'm going to do this one grain side out. Oh, kind of like this. I think I'm going to do it actually flesh out. So we're going to do it in this direction here. So just give yourself a little leeway. I don't like to always cut with my pattern, so we're going to rough cut. So I'm just going to give myself a line here to go ahead and part this from this bigger piece, because this is hard to maneuver because it's so heavy and thick. So all we're going to do is take out this roughly on that line. So here we have our rough cut. Okay, so now we can put our pattern on here. I'm going to cheat as much as I can so I have as much length on my strap. I can always cut this back. I could probably get my welt out of this section here, we'll find out. So you can mark this however you like. This is just a silver pen. It will wipe off of leather when you make it damp. And this is also going to be the waist side. Like, we'll be trimming this back. And we know all these curves line up because we actually cut this while this was folded in half. When we cut this side, it's the same. So now we have our markings, and we just need to cut this out. You can certainly cut it a little wide if you want, or I like to cut it as close as I can. And I will trim this back after we've glued it up so that our sides are all the same. This inside curve's a little small for my knife, so Okay. So now we have roughly cut out our pattern. So we're also going to need to do a welt. So we have that here. And let's see if this is going to fit. Nope, we need another piece. So we can use this piece to get the welt. So what we're going to do is mark here. We need that. It needs to come to here. Let's get a little better leather over here. I think that's got. I'll just go out of here. So the welt is going to get marked here. And we need the outside edge. So we're going to need to match that curvature. And this needs to be a little more than 1/4 inch. So we can just follow this and just. And this will be hidden. And like I said, I'm using a marker because it's easier to show on camera. And we always trim this welt after we fit the knife. So roughly, we just need a piece that's like this. Yeah, I'll trim this, but we're going to leave it a little bit long so we can trim it to match the pattern. Excuse me. So we have our pattern that we made. Now we have our front and back, and we have a strap. And the welt is going to be, since we're doing it this way, see how difficult this is to fold now, even now that it's smaller. So I'm going to get some water, and we're going to go ahead and case this to do the rest of the fit up. considered a stainless. So once we case this, we're going to let it wait a little bit. But you can already see now that we have the ability to fold this over. And the more that we do this, it's going to loosen these fibers up to the point where we can kind of manipulate this. If you do this with oil, it's kind of like, have you heard of drum leather, where they drum soften? They're basically, with liquids and oils, they tumble the leather, and it makes the temper easier. When we use water like this, that once it dries back, the temper is going to remain. It'll come back. It'll only lose a slight bit. If we used oil at this point, it would soften it, and it would remain soft. It would come back, but we would lose some of that temper. So that's like when if I'm going to finish this with oil, but it's going to be an oil that has a lot of wax in it. So that wax helps to temper back in the other direction to keep it a little firmer. So see, now we're able to fold this over and get a much more tight fold on this. And we can also now see where that blade is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put some blue tape on this blade to protect it from the moisture while we fit this up. And you can use saran wrap too. When I do wet molding, I definitely use saran wrap, but since we're just, casing, I'm not all that concerned with getting that much moisture in it, because the tape will protect it. And this knife doesn't have an edge on it, so I'm not concerned about cutting myself, because this hasn't been sharpened yet. This is a knife that I had made a while back. Just never got around to finishing the sheaths for it. So when we do tape it up, we want to try and keep that contour. Also helps to put wax on a knife. This knife does have wax on it, so. When you tape it up, you want to keep the shape of the knife so that when we do our fit up, the fit up matches the actual knife blade. If you don't do this and you end up with rust, you'll just have to use some way to get that rust off. It won't pit, it'll just surface rust, like flash rust it. But it's a lot easier to avoid it than have to fix it later. So let's put a little more water on here. Also, this prevents it from cracking when you bend the leather. When you case it, it's going to let the leather be more malleable, and it's going to not damage the fibers as much while we're doing the bending. Okay, so like I said, this one's going to be flesh out. So we're going to go ahead and fold this to match these two sides. So we want to match these sides up, the edges, the curved edges, and get this fold into it. Okay. So now we're going to fit this up. Let's see. Just checking, make sure we're still on the right side. So I don't often do a flesh out. This is something new. Did I go the right way? Yeah, that's the right way. So the flesh side, or the grain side, is going to be inside where the knife is going to be. And that's going to be plenty of room for up to a 2-inch belt. So let's go ahead and try to fit this now. So the knife is going to go in like this. And we want that knife to come down to about, this is where our fold is. We want this blade in here, about to there. So you can see that up here at the top where we have the handle, we're going to need a lot more flexion. So let's go ahead and case this out into these two areas. Okay, now we're going to be working on the inside. So we're going to put the knife in here. So we may end up shortening this up. And we're going to have more of it up here. So that's going to be about good. So let's pick this up. And we're going to have our strap come down like this, so we have an area to grab the handle to remove it from the sheath. So we come a little further down. We'll come over probably to where that curve is, like that. So once that's on the belt, okay, and so if we look down this, I don't know if you can see down through there or not, but we've got a little more than a 1/4 inch, probably closer to a half. So let's see if we can keep this lined. So I'm going to try and open this up. So this is where the knife is naturally sort of going. We can push it back, but don't know if I want to go any further back. So you can see that this was our center line, and we needed this much space on both sides to make this come over and match up. So this is how much room we have on this side. So we might want to do a smaller welt, or we can just cut this back. That's probably what we're going to do. We'll use the same welt. Let me just trim this back. So, and remember, each pattern is going to be for the thickness of leather you're using. So this welt, I'm going to end a little sooner. So I'm going to go to here with it. And I want that to be about like that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a line. This is the inside. So I'm not ultra concerned about leaving a mark because it's going to be inside or cut off. I'm going to go ahead and follow that line there on that side of the welt. So we can trim this down now. And let's make sure that's going to fit again. And the welt is going to give us the room for stitching or rivets. So if you're doing rivets, you're going to want to go a little wider. But this will line up with that. This will line up with that. And we are fully encased now. And this is going to, let's see. Oh, move it a little forward. Let's see if I can. So we want it a little bit snug. We just don't want to, because we can always stretch the leather or shrink the leather. As you saw in the first video, how we were able to burnish to shrink it, and also with casing we can stretch as well. So I think that's going to work. It might be a little tight, so what I may do, I think I'm going to cheat it a little bit to the outside. So I'm going to half that difference. So I'm probably going to go to here. You can see that. So instead of here where I originally traced it in, I'm going to come out a little ways. And I'm going to put this welt out here. So I think I need a little wiggle room. Because the other batch, these knives, some of them were a little bit bigger than this one. So we're going to go and give ourselves about a little over 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to cheat it back a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark here, and I'm going to trim this off. So we'll be able to trim it back. So this is just, I'm not going to trim it now. I'm going to use that when I glue this welt in. I'm going to glue the welt in to here. Then the knife will purchase about here. And then we're going to fold this over equidistance. So when we go to glue it up, it's going to be with that welt in that place, and we're going to have some air gap here. So this underneath, and then we're going to trim this back to the welt to finish it off. So we need to rough this area to glue this welt in. So I'm just using a rougher, and it's going to be in this general area because that's our outside line. We're going to be cutting back to that. So I just need to rough this up so that we get good adhesion with the contact cement. Now we've already made some adaptations to the pattern, so we will transfer that back over. Before we close this up, so we'll get it transferred back over to this. All right, so that's going to work. We need to rough this side. And I would not use Sharpie. There's a chance that this ink from the Sharpie may bleed out into our edges when we go to finish them. So you can use a pencil or a silver pen for marking leather and fabric. All right, so now we know that this is going to get glued up on that line. So I prefer contact cement just because I use it for everything. I haven't used a lot of water-based cements, so I can't say one way or the other. I know that there's a lot of good ones out there. And we are going to stitch this so we don't have to go through the rigmarole of once this gets tacky, we don't have to reheat this. We'll still get really good adhesion. It's just like the reheating one is like how you would attach shoe soles and stuff. But you can do that if you want. I warped this mat, so I have to order a new mat. Got too much heat on it. So we're gonna let that tack up. We don't need this soaking wet, but we want to keep it damp so we don't crack the leather. I'm not worried about edges and frays and stuff. We're still patterning. So we're going to glue this welt into place. So this is the only part that's going to be visible from the top, and I want to leave a little bit of it so I have something to trim. And we'll go ahead and follow that line, that secondary line that we drew. And this will also give us some airspace at the bottom in case we get water in or condensation inside here. Okay, so we have this now, and I'm going to tamp that down, and that's going to give us some pretty good bond there. So we can go ahead and fold this over again, and we want to remember that we're lining it up with the outside, the original pattern edge. So we can put the knife back into place, fold this over. I'm going to hold it here on this outside edge where we're going to have stitches, and we do have some tension here, so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that doesn't fall out. I'm not pinching the knife, I'm pinching just this outside edge. So once that's stitched and that's stitched, that knife is not going to fall out of there, and then we're going to fit this once we get all this done. So that is basically that's good. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and trim us to the welt, so that when I glue, I can fold it. Actually, I'm going to leave it just like this. I'm going to leave this space here, because if I trim it, I need to take the same amount off at this side, and I'm doing it blind from here. So I think once we get these two glued together, then we can trim that and make that look the way that we want to, because right now we have good fitment, and if we line up this side and this side, we're going to be good. So we're going to go ahead and rough where this welt is going to contact here. So when I fold this over, keeping it fairly even, I can reach inside here and mark here, because we're going to cut this off. So right there is where that welt begins, and with these matched up, the welt ends here. And that's on, so this way I can see where I need to glue to. So I need to run glue from here to here. And so I transferred those marks over. So I will rough up this. a little more than a 1/4 inch in, because we've got, this is roughly a 1/4 inch, and we've got this outside we're going to cut off. And we can do this now. We're going to go ahead and trim this back so we can transfer this to the pattern. So I'm trimming to the welt, and I'm trying to make a nice smooth cut. And I always leave my patterns a little bit larger so that I do have the ability to fit, because like that's a handmade knife. Yeah, I get them pretty close when I make them, but they're not always identical. Sometimes I get a fancy to make it a little bit thicker or thinner. Okay, so we've taken off this edge, and we could just take this and transfer this over to the pattern on the back side. So we like that, or we can just lay our pattern back on here. So this is the side that the edge that I trimmed from. So I'm going to lay that back in place, and then I can trim this to match that. And now my pattern more readily fits what we're actually doing now at this point. But you don't have to trim it back. You can just do like we did, and we have this pattern, and we can cut this blank out, and it's got all of our basic, dimensions in here. We ended up moving this welt a little bit back, but this is basically showing the same. So this pattern is now the same as this with our welt. So we're good there. Okay. And back to the glue pot. Oh, we're going to need to attach this belt loop first before we close that up. So let's figure out how we want to end this. And we could do same kind of arch like this, or you can just square it off. And I'm just going to, I think we went about 1 inch wide. So I'm just going to center this on one of these lines because it's not perfect right now. So we might want to square up this cut here. Just so our strap looks nice and straight. This will be under and behind a belt, but when people are, nobody will see it when you're wearing it, but when you're not wearing it, if somebody's looking at, your craftsmanship, you're going to want these to be nice and straight. I'm just refining these cuts now. We're going to burnish this a little bit, but not a lot, because we're also going to fold this out a little tiny bit. The wet case leather is softer, but also will pull away, so you want to be careful when you're making those cuts. Okay, and how we're going to terminate this. I'm going to line this up here, and I'm just going to I'm going to match a half inch, and take that off. Same on this side. And then we can, if you want, just chop just by rocking to give that a little bit of a rounded corner. Now you can certainly rivet this back here to make your belt loop, but the problem with that is you're going to scratch your knife unless you do a detent, bend that in. So we aren't going to have that option. So we're just going to put a couple of stitches in here. So this is flesh and flesh, so we don't need to do anything but glue this down. And I can see my fold line. And this is going to be visible, so we want to be careful what we mark this with. And I think I'm going to go about right there. So I can use this pen, and I'm just going to make a dot, a tiny dot there, and there, so I don't have as much to clean up. So that's going to tell me where I'm going to actually stitch this. Oh, I accidentally glued that. That wasn't my plan. Because we got to stitch that. So, all right, so we have that lined up, and now we have our strap for this thickness of leather. So we can lay this back on our pattern. To match up. I think I'm off camera. And we can transfer our adaptations. Or you can just trim it like I'm trimming as I'm working. So it looks like it went a little longer. So we need longer length here. So we can go ahead and add to our pattern. So this is our pattern, our beginning pattern, and we can always add and reduce from it. And then once we're done, if you want a nice pattern, you can trace it onto something else and redo it. But for now, we're going to do this so we can get the whole pattern out. So here's our pattern for the next time, and we can definitely, if you want to, lay this back out, straighten these lines up, but this you'll be able to use to reproduce this. Once we get this all done up, I'm probably going to trim this corner off. So that would be trimming this out, sort of like we did this line earlier. We can look at that in a minute, like this one here, where you can see I've marked this to cut that corner out. And that was from this older pattern. So let's see how we did. I know we were working pretty close to it. So roughly that's what we had. This is the pattern I had created 4 years ago for the same or a very similar knife. Okay, so now we've got this, pulled some of that glue off, and put a little more glue on there when I pulled that apart. This is probably wet enough to fold, but I just want to make sure I don't damage this leather. All right, so we can go ahead and start some edge finishing. We're just gonna burnish that, or while we can, edge bevel this inside while it's easy and flat. I have some videos on how to sharpen these tools and how to make a strop so you can keep your tools sharp while you're working. Like if this was starting to be difficult to cut since I'd sharpened it recently, I could come over here to my strop strop the back of that to polish it up. Then come over to this side. And I show you how to use a string to pull through with compound on it to get the inside. We're going to end up cutting that, so we'll trim that when we're done. But we're going to sew this down, so I want to get this edge beveled, because this will be easier once it's looped over. We won't have as easy access to it. Okay, so we're only going to do that part because these, we're going to have all these edges. We want this dead flat, and we're going to finish those once we're done. So we are ready to glue up now. You can put the knife in here when you get ready to do your glue up, just so we know how this is going to fit. And we know that we need to pull this side past. So because we trimmed some off of that. So I'm going to put that knife in here, try to align these. Okay. So I have tension, but I can easily pull it out, and we're going to fit that. And then this is basically what we cut off of the other side. So we're going to go ahead and tamp this down to get it stuck. Oh crap, we forgot to stitch this down, so I'm going to have to use a rivet for this, I think. Because I got that glued down real good now. My mistake. We're going to end up gluing this 3 times. We need to attach the strap first. So let's go ahead and do that. So remember, I had made these marks before, and I'm going to stitch this. And got the glue out to do this and forgot to glue it. So we're going to want some glue on here to hold this in place so we can make our holes. We'll line up those dots. So you can use a marker to mark your stitches if you want. I'll go ahead and do that. A little wider than this. You want to make sure that you come out the back. I'm not going to really show you how to saddle stitch. Nigel Armitage, I'll leave a link. He's got a 3-part series on saddle stitching that I could never do. I mean, that's one of the people I learned how to correctly saddle stitch was from watching his videos. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to try and show you how to saddle stitch when there's an excellent resource like his videos. It's a 3-part series on the saddle stitch that goes over absolutely every aspect. So I would refer you to that. There'll be a link in the description to get to see that from Nigel. This is Ritza tiger thread, but I also like Maine thread. And normally you go about 4.5 to 5 times the perimeter, but you also need to accommodate the thickness of your stitches. But as a general rule of thumb, and Nigel actually has an app for your phone that you can put on and put the thickness and the layers and your stitch length, and it will calculate how long of a piece of thread you need to do your stitches. So like I said, Nigel's much further along than I am. It's certainly with teaching how to stitch, and so I would use him. And like I said, I'll leave a link to check out his videos on the saddle stitch, which are extremely comprehensive. So I'd have been better off doing a saddle stitch because I messed up the stitching here. But just because you have a machine doesn't mean it's going to make, you know, exactly what you want it to do. So, but we do have a sheath, so let's go ahead and we're going to make this one a waxed flesh out. But let's see how it fits. We have a difficulty getting in here, so we're going to want to, when we do the wax and sort of form this, we're going to want to open that up so it's easier to go in. We're going to put the knife down in here, and we're going to compress this section here and finish these edges up. So you could do this with water or, you know, to get that form fit, but we're going to use some wax and oil to do it and get this sheath finished up. So what I'm going to use is this Aussie leather conditioner, and what I like about this is a good one for outdoors. It has a lot of waxes in it as well as oils, and it's going to darken this up a lot. So basically for that, all we're going to do is get a lot of this out here and just start working it in. So this will be like a waxed flesh finish when we're done. We're also going to work the edges here. And this is a good waterproofer. So effectively it's going to make the sheath pretty water resistant. And we're probably going to have to do about 4 or 5 coats on this till it stops drinking. So I got this really well saturated with this conditioner. Or if you were going to wet form it, you know, by casing it, you could case it. I'm using this in place of water. You can get some down inside. This won't hurt your knife. Most of it's going to absorb into the leather. Don't want to get too conditioned on the inside. We're just getting a little coating in here. Mainly going to be on the outside because you don't want to soften that leather so much that the blade just cuts right into it. I'm going to start rolling this edge with my finger here to open this up. So we have good access for the knife handle. So just using my fingers to flare it. So you see that'll basically drink that up. We'll put some more on it. We can also start to burnish edges with anything you've got that's a hard edge. You can finish this as much as you want. You could have also done some tooling if you're interested in tooling. using this burnisher to pry this edge out, finish this edge, but also make room for that handle. This will naturally burnish too, just by when you're wearing it. So the burnishing I'm doing is not so much for a beautiful finished edge, but trying to compress these fibers to get them to seal up, because this is kind of like a working sheath. You can make them as pretty as you want or as rustic as you want. But for this series, it's all about patterning and how to make a sheath for different types of blades, knives, things you need to protect, tools. Now, if you wanted to, you could have let this dry out. We're still going to have a little bit, but like I said, if you're concerned about these watermarks, then you would want to let this, you would want to wet the whole thing when we were working it earlier. But I kind of like the patina, and it's gonna even out pretty well. And this is gonna act a little bit like a pull-up leather when we get a lot of this oils and fats in here. So this is going to change color, and it's going to patina pretty nice with it being rough out. Waxed flesh finish. I'm going to oil this again, or condition it again. But for right now, I just want to get this blade fitted. So we're nice and moisturized. It's kind of feeling like a little bit like clay. So just getting most of the excess off. So we're going to put the knife in. That's about where I want that. So now, while this is still malleable and oily, I'm compressing between the welt and the spine. Making this bend on the back a little harder. coming over to this side. Want to be careful not to bend your knife. So we're going to support that because we've got this on the back and the handle, the difference between here and there. So I want to make sure I'm kind of well supported here before I come in like this here. The majority of the work we're going to do is going to be up here where the knife slides in. So we want this to contour to the handle, but we also want this to be nice and open so it's easy to put the knife away. So that's a pretty good fit. I like the look of that. And we've got this little flare here. And you can keep working that and you can rework it. You can pinch this down. Pull this out for for a belt. Or keep it tight. But that's going to fit. A 2-inch belt or smaller easily. So like I mentioned, you can continue to condition this. And burnish it for a good fit. So I don't know if you can hear that, but that wax is starting to tack up, and so that's going to keep it sort of firm. So we're going to put some more. And you can finish it to whatever level you want to. If you need to tighten it up, you can push the fold back and it'll push the blade more towards the welt. So we're going to let this conditioner soak in and firm up, and we'll do the final fit. So I'll let this sit for about an hour and then we'll be back, okay? All right, it's been a few hours now, so the oils have soaked in. Basically, we've got a sheath now. It started to become rigid again. You can continue to put more oil and wax on this, but effectively we've created a pattern from a knife. So we patterned a sheath, standard taco sheath with a belt loop. Of course, you can add all kinds of different things to it. If you wanted to, you could put a ring in this, and then another strap and a strap around here to tie to the thigh for like a much larger knife. If you enjoyed the video and make sure you give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe. And this is number 2 of a series. We're going to be doing the next one's going to be on a draw knife, and we're going to be doing an envelope sheath. So I've got that, and then we're going to be doing a felling axe. So that's what I've got in store for us. If you have any other ideas, feel free to comment, and I'll try to address those coming up, or it'll probably be, at least right now, it's a 4-part series. But if you guys ask more questions or give some suggestions to see if you want to know how to design a sheath for anything particular, let me know, and we'll get to that if I can. All right, so we can take our knife out of the protective tape, and we have a nice tight fit. It's not going to fall out. So there's other things you can do too. You could also add a strap, from behind the belt clip across here to a snap. So just anything. This is just basically how would you pattern it and then be able to reproduce it. And I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. So have a great day or great night, and we'll see you next time.